Thank you, Ursula. As she said, I have been playing with educational technology since 1995. One of those moments where we see things like the internet web for the first time, and it didn't take me long to think that this is for teaching, and the whole purpose of this is for teaching. And I've been doing research for a long time. I'm also probably the only person in the room who's gotten a tattoo in the last 48 hours. Has anybody else gotten a tattoo in the last 48 hours? So I kind of have this weird thing about my research, and that is I promise my significant collaborators that if they implement my recommendations, I will tattoo their logo on my shoulder. So that is the Blackboard, Desire to Learn, Canvas, Moodle, Sakai, Angel. Most of these are the tools that you've used and when you went to school. No matter where you went to school, you probably used one of these things. And there is technology that I created in each one of them. And when they put my technology in, I get a tattoo. And 2 days ago, I was out in San Francisco at Coursera headquarters, and they finished putting technology, learning tools interoperability, the standard that I created, with many other people in. And I promised them I'd put a tattoo in once it was done. And so I went to a tattoo shop. I used Yelp, social media. I tried to find a nice tattoo shop near Belmont, picked the one that Yelp suggested. I didn't drink before the tattoo, which you're not supposed to drink before you do a tattoo. So I have a fresh Coursera tattoo on my shoulder, not because I'm teaching, but because they're also technology collaborators. So if you look at this picture, you will see several hundred universities, top-flight universities around the world, giving courses away for free. There are 6 sort of aggregators of these things. Coursera is the largest of these. edX is another one. And if you go to one of those courses, one of those providers, Coursera, and you find one course, you will see me. I teach a course, one of 455 courses on Coursera. But I want to take you back in time 18 months. 18 months ago, the word MOOC was finally being sort of said out loud. There was only one provider of these. It was Coursera. And there were only 4 universities: Stanford, University of Michigan, Princeton, and the University of Pennsylvania. The whole thing was done in a whole bunch of secret. I was very, very lucky. No one told me this was happening. I just did something kind of dumb, and then they had to tell me about it. And then I said, please let me in. And so I was like one of the 15th teacher to teach in Coursera. And so I was on early. I always like being early on everything that I do. They let me teach any class I would like. I forced my way in. And most of the courses in Coursera, because they came from Stanford, were very technology-oriented classes. A lot of junior-level computer science classes, most so hard that you pretty much already had to have a degree in computer science to understand them. And I decided that given my past history, that I would teach something that was more of a liberal art, even though I'm a trained computer scientist. I wanted to teach something that would take people who didn't know anything about technology and give them the sense that they could understand technology and maybe hook them to the point where they would learn more. And so I also wanted to do something that no one else could do. And so I was lucky in the 1990s. My claim to fame is I was a co-host of the first nationally televised talk show about the internet. That's very carefully crafted. A couple of years after we started this internet TCR and nothing but net, Tech TV existed, and there's all this other stuff, and our show was really produced by the cable companies to convince people that cable modems were a good idea. It was really a product placement by cable television, and they shipped this all over, and we would say, and our cable modem is so much faster than yours, right? Now what you don't know is you can see sweat beads coming off of us because the cable modem is breaking all the time because we're in East Lansing, one of the first 4 communities to have cable modems in the country, and it hardly ever worked, right? And so, but it also was a real fun thing. I want to show you a little bit of video from this.
Last month I was off in Boston for the 4th Annual World Wide Web Conference, and I had the opportunity to talk to the inventor of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, and I asked him a little bit about where are we going with this web stuff. And we have just a little bit of footage from Tim telling us where that's going to be.
You haven't seen nothing yet, but you wait until people assume the web. When the web becomes something you can assume, when the infrastructure is all laid down, and we have an information space, then it will be time for the next revolution, and who knows what that will be.
It's hard to imagine a greater revolution than what we've seen. I mean, I go to the smallest places and everybody's putting up a web page.
Right, but the web could only take place, the web revolution could only take place because the internet, which had been a quieter, smaller revolution, but that had been the internet itself quietly being deployed throughout the world, had happened because the internet was something people could assume the web revolution could take place. When the web is something you can assume, then maybe a cultural revolution, a nicer cultural revolution than the cultural revolution, perhaps, or maybe we'll find ways of doing things better that we hadn't imagined.
Pretty neat, Rich. One of the things that I liked about it was he just said his idea was the next step is something completely different. A cultural revolution is compared to just a little more technology.
So I probably should have warned you that as men get younger, they get less handsome, right? And so I was lucky in that I could walk around, and the internet was a much smaller place in 1995, and we could put cameras in people's faces, and we would get Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented the whole thing, and he would just talk to us. And so I'm sitting around with all these high-8 tapes in my possession, and I thought, well, why not make a course on this? Because like no one else has what I have, and so I have no competition. So I'll be the best internet history course ever because no one else has what I had. So I created this course called Internet History, Technology, and Security. It was the second course taught at University of Michigan, about the 15th course taught in Coursera. And the way I did this is I recorded it. I'd been doing distance education since 96, 97 timeframe, and I decided that what I didn't want was just to give a lecture and tape it in the back and in effect diminish the distance education student. So I turned it into like a talk show where I talk straight to the student, nobody else. It's just me and the student. So I can create a sense of intimacy between myself and the student. And I would scribble on stuff and talk about stuff, and it just worked out pretty well. What's kind of cool is the networks are so fast that all this high-quality material can go all over the world. This was a self-reported survey that we did of where the students were. They're absolutely all over the world, many different languages. You would put up a lecture, and it would be translated in somewhere between 10 and 15 languages within a week. The interesting thing was I originally thought that these were just nice people that were translating these languages, but what they were doing was they were translating them for themselves. Because it turned out that we would give them an English transcript, they would translate it to Portuguese, put the Portuguese translation back in, and then watch the lecture in Portuguese. Because then they understood the lecture better, but then everyone else in Portuguese could get the translation for free. It was really quite impressive. This created a sense of intimacy. The forums created a sense of intimacy. We had a lot of fun, but one of the problems that distance education claims is that there's all this loneliness, and we always talk about how lonely the students are. No one ever talks about how lonely the teachers are. They get to know who I am. I tell funny jokes. I try to create a sense of family, even for people spread around all the time zones of the world, but I didn't know who they were. Now, I have quite a travel schedule, so I invented this notion of face-to-face office hours. So what I would do is I would send an email to 120,000 of my students in all my sections, say, I will be at a coffee shop in a mall in Manila, Philippines from 10 o'clock till noon, and if you're in my class, show up. So I've done this about 15 places all over the world. You see a list of the places that I've been, and we just sit and talk. Now, they think I'm like the greatest, nicest guy in the world for flying all the way from Michigan to the Philippines. Now, what I'm really doing is running a focus group to understand what this is all about. And I would also make a video, and here's one of the videos from the Philippines. Hello, this is Charles Severance. I'm coming to you from Manila, Philippines, at a Starbucks at Robinson's Place at office hours here on the 26th of November 2012 in Manila. And let's introduce some of the students in the class. Let me turn the light on here. Light. There we go. That's better. Okay, so just, say your first name, and let me get close so we get good audio. Say your first name and anything else you want to say.
Hi, I'm Sherry from the University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Hi, I'm Jeff. Welcome to Manila, Philippines. I'm Rodel Brand from Cebu. Thank you for the book.
Win. Okay.
Iris from University of the Philippines, Manila.
Hello, I'm Mervin from UPOU.
Hello, I'm Audrey, and representing also my husband Fabio.
Hi, I'm Josen.
Okay, so there you have it. Yet another successful Internet History, Technology, and Security Coursera office hours. I think the next place that we're going to be meeting is Paris at the end of January. The next office hours is in Slovenia in December. So I'll be meeting my students in Slovenia. So there's a couple things we can learn from this right away. There weren't any 18 to 24-year-olds in there, right? There weren't typical what we think of college students in there. One of the women, Isis, she's a dean. A dean of the School of Medical Informatics took my course. One of those guys traveled overnight for an hour and a half on an airplane because the Philippines is a set of islands, and he did this. And so it's really quite interesting because one of the things I want to do is teach teachers, not just teach students, but teach teachers, and that's been one of my goals from the very beginning. So I've run this class. When you have 50,000 students in a class, the teacher is never going to be able to answer all the questions, and so I carefully don't answer any questions. I wait until the students answer each other's questions. In a class of 30, it is quite easy for a student to be so confused. Well, in a class of 30, some students get it right away, and some students are confused. In a class of 50,000, so many students get it right away that the confused student asks a question, and one of the students that got it right away, the 25,000 students, answers the question almost immediately, sometimes less than 20 minutes. So I didn't answer any questions. What I would do is I would cruise the forums, and I would wait until I found someone who answered a question. Then from down on high in Mount Olympus, I would say, "Sue, what a great answer." I never answered any question. I only complimented people who did answer questions, who took initiative and helped their fellow students. So I created a community in this from the very beginning. Now, some of these students have turned into my teaching assistants. So some of these have been with me 4 times. Mauro, Susan, and Mason, well, Sue actually, are my head TAs. Now I'm running this course with about 28,000 students right now, and I spend less than an hour a week on it. They think I'm all over the place, right? Because I still show up in the forums, but these guys tell me where to go and where to pile on. But like I said, I want to teach teachers. This is one of my head TAs. He's Italian, lives in Milan. I almost got to meet him. I want to meet all my teaching assistants now. That's my next kind of goal. He is starting a thing at his local library teaching Internet history in Italian using my slides, which I Creative Commons licensed to them. And so he's translating it all into Internet history. He's starting his own little group of people to learn Internet history in Italy. So I'm creating a teacher, not just creating knowledge. This gives you a little sense of the kind of students that we have. It's a lot of data, but basically almost 2/3 of the people in my freshman kind of class already have a bachelor's, master's, or PhD, MD, or JD. 2/3. So it tells us a little bit about who is learning and taking these classes. So here's some data. Everybody cites these big numbers. I've taught in 4 sessions 139,000 people enrolled, but only 53,000 showed up for the first lecture, and only 31,000 made it through the first week, and 12,804 made it all the way through the entire 11-week semester. I really don't care about these big numbers, but all the press releases always talk about the big numbers. I'd much prefer to look at the numbers of the students who are actually serious. I retain, with nothing but a piece of paper at the end, I retain 41% of my students through the entire 11-week class, which I think is pretty good. So let's ask a few questions. A lot of the criticism, a lot of the stuff you read in the press about MOOCs, I'm trying to come up with a nice way to say it. It's mostly crap by professional journalists who have a Friday deadline and they can't think of anything else to write about, so they just write a mean story about these massive courses. I could spend my whole life telling them how wrong they are, but I don't. One of the criticisms is this new? I was teaching online in 1996 with that kind of scary picture in the upper left-hand corner there of me staring at you. It was a 14.4 modem. We couldn't send video, so I had a picture looking at you the whole time, which was kind of creepy, right? These days, because of things like Netflix and YouTube, some of my students watch me on a big screen TV from 6 feet away. Ursula mentioned she watched in the bedroom. Was it on a laptop or on a big screen TV? Laptop. Okay. But even on a laptop, the size of my face is larger than those of you sitting in the back of the room that's here in the room right now. And the slides that you're looking at are harder to read here than they are online. Another question that people have is, what's the business model? Well, it's a simple thing. Coursera has 5 million students and 50 employees. If they can make $10 per student, that's $50 million, or $1 million per employee. Next question. Students drop out a lot. Is this bad or is this good? Well, I think this is called student-centered learning, and as Daniel Pink said, autonomy. We want autonomy, and then we see it, and then we complain when we see it. And so the notion that students shop around, pick classes, and only do the things that they really care about, that's not a problem. It's a wonderful aspect of this. The next thing is, this is not about measuring. This is about teaching those who want to learn. That's an important lesson. I cannot create the kind of stress that I can create in a real live classroom. A lot of folks talk about the fact that this is somehow the end of higher education, and it's not. Okay, because it's actually a very different. You can learn a lot from a MOOC, but only if you want to. If you're in my class on campus, I can teach you a lot, even if you barely care, because I can put you under so much stress that you're forced to learn. I'm not saying that's the best way to learn, but I can force you to learn. There will be folks who try to make money off of this. It makes me sad. I think this is a really wonderful thing. I fear for the students. I fear for teachers or parents who say there is an infinite number of courses that you have to take. And you got to do this. Or before I'm going to give you your allowance, you got to go take a calculus class from Princeton, right? So the fact that there's unlimited free education is a little unnerving to me. Because the next thing you know, that Harvard and MIT will tell all the 17-year-olds in the world that they need 20 Coursera certificates just to get admitted. What I'm thinking about as a faculty member at the University of Michigan is how I can use this technology to produce better graduates. Not necessarily save money, not necessarily make money, but how to produce better graduates. For those of us in the room who are teachers, I think that's the important thing. This is only 18 months old. And I'll leave you with one last thought, and that is current top-level institutions, Michigan is one of them, are defined currently by their research output. The notion of a large research university is a notion that came after World War II in the 1950s, so it's not always been that way. If you look at the budget of the University of Michigan and you look at the budget of School of Information, the way we make money is through teaching. This, if we come back in 20 years, research may no longer be the way we're measured. Teaching may be the way we're measured, and MOOCs may just be the beginning of a change to measuring the school and picking the school where it is that you're going to learn the best. And MOOCs could be showing how good we are at teaching. Thank you very much.